Hi, this is Seth Mosley. You're listening to the Full Circle Music Show, the why of the music biz. Today we have with us in-house Leslie Jordan from All Sons and Daughters. For those of you guys who are fans of All Sons and Daughters, you know what they're about. You know why they are becoming one of the most popular, sought-after worship bands in the world now. And Leslie was gracious enough to take some time out of her busy schedule to come and chat with us, share with us about her story, moving to Nashville, becoming one of the leading worship songwriters in the country, and now touring and working on their new record, Poets and Saints. I definitely cannot say that I've ever made a record the way that they did this one, so you're going to want to stick around and hear how they did that. But before we jump in, just wanted to make sure that you're aware the last couple spots for the Music Makers Boot Camp are still available, and here's a quick message about it. Are you an aspiring artist, producer, or songwriter? Have you ever wanted to break into the music business but didn't know where to start? Would you be interested in spending a weekend with some of the leaders in the industry? Well, here is your opportunity. It's called the Music Makers Boot Camp, and it's happening January 25th through 28th live in Franklin, Tennessee. It's going to be happening at the legendary Sound Kitchen Studios, where records like Taylor Swift, Paramore, Keith Urban, Bruce Springsteen, and many more have been made. You'll be learning in these rooms where multi-platinum songs have come to life. And we'll be bringing in some of the best and the brightest who are doing it every day to share their wisdom, knowledge, and experience. This is a great opportunity for you to take your music production, songwriting, or artistry skills to the next level. The music industry doesn't have to be some big secret. Me and the other coaches really want to share what we are doing with you. Come and learn it with us. Registration is now open at FullCircleGoesLive.com. Again, that's FullCircleGoesLive.com. It's limited to only 40 spots, so get yours now. These sell out quick, so don't miss your chance. I'll see you there. So head over and check that out, and let's jump into the studio with Leslie Jordan from All Sons and Daughters here on the Full Circle Music Show. Seth Mosley here with my lovely co-host.
How's it going, guys? It's X.
X O'Connor. And in-house today, we've got with us from All Sons and Daughters, Leslie Jordan.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. We were just kind of talking podcasts, and I'm a podcast junkie. I guess sounds like you maybe are too.
I am. I get really excited when people go, "Hey, what podcast should I listen to?" I'm like,
Yeah.
"Ooh, what are you into?
Yeah.
Funny, serious, stories, sermons?"
Yeah, which type of podcast?
Yeah, totally.
Do you sit down and listen to like the 3-hour? What's the guy's name who does like the 4-hour podcast?
I've heard about those though.
Oh, there's quite a few.
He dives super. He's one of the top guys all the
Yeah.
time. I can't completely drawing a blank on the name, but I'm kind of just like, when does anybody have 4 hours?
No, yeah, definitely not. The longest podcast I'll listen to is usually like an hour and a half, and I'll have to split it up.
Yeah.
I listened to one the other day with Richard Rohr, and they had split the podcast into two. And so I listened to the one, and I was like feverishly taking notes, and I was like, I'm going to have to come back to this. And so it was like 2 45-minute segments, and that was...
Well, you kind of have to like process it, right?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
that's like,
Yeah.
how do you process 4 hours worth of...
No, there's no way.
I'd have forgotten the first 3 hours
Yeah.
by the time.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. So why don't you just kind of share your story? We've gotten to know each other a little bit, but I'd love to hear your backstory. How did you get into music? How did you move to Nashville?
Oh, man.
What's the whole, I mean, go
Let's
all the way back.
Go way back. I grew up around music. Like, music was always on. My dad had a story for every song. You know, it's like, oh, prom, 19s, you know,
Yeah.
like I don't know if I want to hear this story or not. And so music was just a huge part of my upbringing. My dad sang in the choir at church. There was always music on. So I grew up singing, and I think it was around 2nd or 3rd grade I asked for my first instrument, the violin. And I was terrible at it, so I only played the violin for about a year, and then got a guitar in 4th grade.
Can't really just dabble in violin.
You really
You gotta
can't.
commit.
Yeah, nobody told me that. They're like, yeah, sure, go for it. Twinkle, Twinkle,
Yeah.
Little Star, also known as the ABCs.
Yeah.
Was, the melodies are great for,
Yeah.
multiple songs.
Yeah.
But I gave that up pretty quickly. Didn't have that discipline to learn that instrument. So guitar in 4th grade, and I started writing songs when I was in middle school, and like, teenage angsty middle school songs about my parents' divorce and, my siblings and all the things that like
little Alanis Morissette.
Yeah. Oh man, I loved Alanis Morissette. So of course, yeah. Jagged Little Pill.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until high school that I got into worship music. It's interesting. The more people I talk to about this was kind of their story, especially back in the 90s, and early 2000s. If you played an instrument, they needed you in the praise band. It's like, oh, you played the acoustic guitar, you're the worship leader. Yeah. What? And so I was 15 and got kind of roped into doing that. And I didn't really want to do it. Coming out of writing those angsty teenage songs, those two things didn't make a whole lot of sense in the same breath for me. But I did it, and then continued to write songs, and all through high school and college. And then in college, my junior year, I fell in love with the church. So it was kind of out of nowhere. Was a part of a church plant actually in Hawaii. I took a little internship out there in college, and fell in love with this church plant out there. And really, for me, that kind of solidified my path. I was like, I actually do want to work in this ministry. I want to work for a church and lead worship, and had never written worship songs before, but moved back to Nashville and got involved at Journey Church here. A couple years later, met a guy named David Leonard who was playing rock music and trying to figure things out. And so that's kind of where the birth of All Sons and Daughters happened. Was both of us felt this desire to write songs for the church, but neither one of us had done it before. So it was kind of interesting how we came from two different sides of the spectrum, because I had never gone into the music industry. I had seen kind of the negative side of it when I was 18. I was offered a record deal at 18, and I turned it down. Some of the things about it, I was like, I don't know. So I had this like stiff arm perspective of the music industry, and especially the Christian music industry. I was like, I don't know if I want anything to do with that.
What about it seemed kind of negative at the time?
I think for me, I was still working out my identity. You're 18, and I didn't know who I was. And I saw from this perspective a lot of people who were more eager to tell me who I was than help me figure that out on my own. And so it seemed very opportunistic from their perspective. And so I think I just had a lot of red flags, and I was like, I don't know if I'm comfortable letting you tell me who I am, as opposed to me just kind of sorting through it on my own. And I don't know how that would have turned out had I said yes. I mean, it could have been an amazing opportunity, but it's interesting. We were talking about the Enneagram a second ago. A lot of my decisions are based out of fear. So I was like, well, I don't want to do that, because it sounds kind of scary and unsafe. It doesn't feel right. Yeah. But David and I came from two really different sides of the spectrum. He had been in the music industry for a long time. We met and kind of had this really pure intention to just provide our songs, or provide our church with songs. And we had no idea what was going to happen after that. So
yeah.
I
think that's actually really great advice for any artist that might be listening to this. That I think a lot of people move to Nashville or move to LA or wherever they move with the intention of wanting to be the next big thing, and they go to meeting after meeting trying to figure out who's their label or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's more a question of, well, what are you looking to sign right now?
Yeah.
I'll be that.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
There's no longevity in that.
Right.
I think you can actually make money at it.
Yeah.
Like you can actually, we've been a part of a lot of projects that I know that it's like, whose record are we making? Like, are we, like the artist leaves and are we supposed to like do everything on it? And like,
are you just guys guesting on ours or
on
yours? Or?
Yeah.
And it's different ways. I guess it's not right or wrong. It's just, I do believe the way that you have went about it, there's a lot more longevity because it comes from you.
Yeah.
And you're always going to be you.
Yeah.
A lot of people get disillusioned after living in Nashville for 5 or 10 years because they go, am I this person? Am I this person? They want this from me. They want this. Yeah. So I commend you for sticking to your guns on that.
Thanks. Out of fear, no fear. That's where we landed on that one. It's interesting. We meet and talk with a lot of, new artists in this town, and we caution people because and not just, for the industry's sake, but even from our story, like we say you have to test and see, and you have to figure out what your path looks like. And for us, this was obviously the path we chose, and But I think there are a lot of people who come to Nashville with a dream and would just rather someone tell them the ending.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that road is a lot longer and is a lot harder and comes with a lot more heartache.
Yeah.
We definitely love talking with new folks who come to town and hopefully encourage and not discourage in that way.
Yeah.
Well, when you guys were starting out as an act, did you have anyone that kind of helped guide you as well? I know you said you hesitated to sign anything when you were younger, but as you guys matured and you started looking to actually do this professionally, was there anyone that kind of helped you guys figure out your way?
Yeah, and that's kind of a funny story too, because we, at the time, David was ready to come off the road, and I still had that stiff arm stance, like, nope, I don't want anything to do with the industry. And so we just recorded these songs and gave them to our church. And I was like, well, that was easy. You can be a musician and you don't have to, do anything, you know, or sign anything. And we had a friend come along who was a part of our church at the time. And she was working for our current label now, Integrity Music. She was doing kind of trying to develop some live event stuff for them. But she and David were really good friends and had been for several years. Throughout his whole career, she had kind of been in and out. And she called him one day and she was like, I just got this music from church and I love singing these songs. What the heck are you guys doing? And would you consider having a conversation that maybe looks a little deeper into this story? He knew my answer would be no pretty much right away. And so he was like, hey, Natalie and I are driving by your house. I just had a conversation with Teresa. Is there any way we can stop by your house? And so Natalie and David came over and sat with my husband Thomas and I, and we just dove into that conversation and we said, all right, well, here are my hesitations and here were David's hesitations and us as families. What are our non-negotiables? And so I think that for me was it was a good way of kind of baby stepping into it. So, because we weren't out looking for a record deal, it really kind of came to us. The question was, would you be willing to explore this further? And so we did have to make that decision to go, yeah, we're willing, but only with, these non-negotiables in place. And our label has been incredible for us because they have our non-negotiables were that we continue to serve at our church. That's the primary thing that we do. And without it, it doesn't make any sense. And so they have just been consistently supportive of what we do and behind us. And so it definitely worked out way better than I think we could have ever imagined.
That's great.
Yeah.
And that meaning no touring on Sundays, basically?
Yeah,
or?
I mean, we've had to. That's just kind of the nature. And the label never dictated that for us. Like, that's been the beautiful thing is they've been very open-handed with how much we tour. We tour because we know it supports the efforts of the projects we're making, And because we love relationships with worship leaders in other churches and communities. And we've had some really great opportunities, but the label's never asked that of us. We've just kind of set that as a standard for ourselves. We're going to balance time away with time at home and make sure that when we're home, if it's on the weekends, we're engaged with our community and we're engaged in our small groups throughout the week and we're tethered. And I think a lot of times worship bands and folks who are writing worship songs, there is a tendency to untie yourself so that you're more available to go and do things. But our biggest thing is stay tethered, stay connected, stay rooted, and watch kind of how God does stuff through that.
That's kind of just good advice to anybody in music. I mean, you've got to have your people outside of, I mean, it's kind of interesting because I used to have the mentality of like you gotta kind of separate the two. There's like work and there's your friends, and then over the years I've kind of just found that my friends have become the people that I work with, and I guess there's not really anything wrong with that. It's just sort of the nature of the beast. But I do think, like you said, it's important to be tethered to people who are actually, whether those are people that you do work with or not, to have a home base.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell people all the time, road life is like fantasy land. You have very little responsibility. You can sleep till noon if you want. Some people don't even take their own stuff off the bus or the trailer. It is. You show up, there's a bowl of gummy bears in the green room every day. But you're like, all of your dreams come true.
Was that one of your non-negotiables?
Yeah.
Gummy bears?
Yes, absolutely.
Organic though?
Or definitely.
Non-GMO.
Definitely. And so it's really easy, I think, and the more people we talk to about road life, it's like the transition of coming back home, that like re-entry period for a lot of people, especially if you're married, you're like, I don't know who you are because I haven't seen you for the last 2 weeks. and you're apparently a bachelor now because like it's
Totally.
trying to sort out how to have those relationships. So if you stay connected, if you stay intentional, it just makes that whole thing so much easier.
Yeah. I mean, talk about Poets and Saints, because I know your guys' newest project has a very interesting story of even how you guys made it.
Yeah. We thought we were going to do a project based around a group of people just studying their old writings. That was the original intent. It's like, man, what if we take this group of poets and saints, which was inspired by a quote from the play Our Town. And does anyone ever experience life as they live it? The response was no, saints and poets do, some of them. And so it kind of got us thinking like, man, what about these two groups of people? How do they stay so intentional and present in the moment? And could we learn something from their stories? And so from that, it snowballed into a trip, and it turned into a book and a curriculum for small groups and an album. And before we knew it, we were in Europe for 2 weeks with 13 people on a tour bus. And we started in Northern Ireland and ended in Rome. Wow. And each city, we had a different person that we studied, and we took a film crew with us. And we talked about very human elements of their story. So C.S. Lewis, we talked about vulnerability and his desire, even in his wrestle with God and with the church. He was so tied to this group of men, and they would meet weekly at the Eagle and Child, in this pub in Oxford, and they would, talk about their stories. J.R.R. Tolkien, they're talking about Lord of the Rings and Narnia and these crazy things that we've read our whole lives. And the story that he took his whole life to write was the story called Till We Have Faces. Mm-hmm. And it's this whole idea that we live the majority of our life with this veil over our face, and what would happen if we could live more authentically. And so we found ourselves in these places. We sat in the back of the Eagle and Child, and we talked about what vulnerability looks like for us. And so it was 3 or 4 of us, and we would just have this dialogue and film it. And it turned into a 7-week small group study community experience for people to go through together with your families, with your church, however you want to do it. But it was a much bigger project than we originally started out. It was so much more chaotic. I was like, what have we done? And our label was kind of confused. They're like, you want to do what? And you're going to need how much money to do this? And they're like, no, trust us. It's going to be awesome. And man, they did trust us, and they sent us with their blessing, and we had an incredible time. And we wrote 10 songs that correspond with 10 different poets and saints, or maybe more. I can't even remember how many songs we wrote now. Yeah. But yeah, it was a crazy experience.
Yeah. And I assume songs that you're leading in church, or
yeah.
I guess this is an interesting question, because I think a lot of people walk this line of, well, are there, to you, and what All Sons and Daughters is, are there artist songs, and then are there songs that you specifically write for church?
Yeah.
Or is it kind of all just one thing for you?
I think for us, in the writing process, we tend to just write. And this project specifically, we looked at a lot of old hymns, and that was really where we wanted to start anyway. So we would take words that these folks wrote. Like John Newton, for instance, is probably best known for Amazing Grace, but he wrote 300 other hymns in 1 year alongside Amazing Grace, inside what may be the first hymnal ever written. And so we took that hymnal home from Olney, England, and we said, well, let's just pick one and rewrite it. And the story of, it was more so capturing those stories, but we really believe that the church can sing these songs. We just got a little bit more creative in how we wrote them and how we recorded them this year. So I think there definitely is a little bit more artistic expression in this project for us. And we maybe weren't as mindful of our specific community as a church, and we took a little bit more risk. I definitely think at the end of the day, there's still songs for the church, because that's a lot of them. That's where they originated from. We borrowed a lot of words. There's so much rich content in the old hymns. And so it was really like mining for gold for us in that process.
That's very awesome.
Cool. Yeah.
So even beyond music, though, you guys have a lot of outreach that you do. Talk to us a little bit about some of the other things you do to help reach communities.
Yeah. So on our tours, our biggest, one of the things we said was, how do we stay connected, not just to our church, but to the larger church? Signing autographs and taking pictures is always a weird thing for us. And so we just kind of said, what would be a counter to that? A way to stay connected without making it about this fan connection. And so we started doing these Q&As after our shows where we would just hang and kind of open for dialogue. And that really kind of, I think it met kind of that same desire for people to connect with us and our desire to connect with them. And it meant we weren't running to the bus right after the show. And then beyond that, we've done worship leader lunches where we would contact local worship leaders, and we would spend an entire, 2 or 3 hours with them and talk story and hear about their churches and their struggles. It's like, we get it. We're there. We're leading worship, and on staff at our church too. And then last fall, instead of a regular touring model, we did this thing called the neighborhood tour. And we went to one particular area, like demographic. So we went to like the Dallas area, and we did 3 shows around the Dallas area within like an hour or 2 driving. So Waco, I think we were in Oklahoma somewhere, and then outside Dallas. And then on the 3rd day, we hosted a worship conference. And so we reached out to all 3 of those communities and said, hey, on the 4th day, we want you to come here and spend the whole day with us. And
very cool.
And our whole team was involved in that. So, we had breakout sessions on guitar playing, and we had breakout sessions on how to create song lists and songwriting. And so for us, that just kind of, it helps balance us out from, like I said, that fantasy land of touring. It keeps us connected. So that's been a big part of what we do on the road.
That's great.
Yeah. How did that work out because that's kind of an interesting idea. You're doing the 3 shows and then one big one.
Yeah. It worked really well. The model actually came from a promoter in Canada, and we did like 4 shows in Toronto or around Toronto. We're like, how are people showing up every night to this? It was like each night was a full night, and we were
different people each night.
Yeah, different people each night, and their response was, "Well, Canadians don't like to drive anywhere." So we were like, we got really curious. So we were like, would this could this work in the States? And it worked. Like it was, like we had maybe some smaller shows in terms of turnout, but for us, the beauty was that last day, that conference, and we actually didn't even play music that day. We just sat with anywhere from like 30 to 100 worship pastors and leaders. And it was really cool. Wow. So, yeah.
That's awesome. So, talking a little bit about your bigger picture, you've not only started writing songs for other people to sing, you've written a lot of songs for other artists as well. Can you talk about yourself as a songwriter, and has that always kind of been a goal of yours?
I think it's a natural expression of my internal dialogue. It's kind of the way that things just kind of fall out, has always been songwriting. But there are days I wake up and I go, is this what I do for a living? Like, people trust me to write songs? That seems crazy to me. Because I just constantly doubt my ability to do that. And I think every session I go into, I'm like, I have nothing to offer. And I think I'd almost rather start there than, well, I got this really great song. And because, I think pride can get in the way too, in some ways. And so, yeah, it's always been a desire, but I never thought it could be a career. And so it blows my mind all the time that I get to do that and sit with other artists and hear about their life and translate that into a song, into a story that probably will resonate with a lot of other people. I think that's been the benefit of writing songs for the church, is you learn what is the broader story and what is more accessible to people and how to communicate that. And so I've really enjoyed that part of songwriting. Yeah. Just turning that into a narrative that sounds familiar.
And you have kind of an interesting, you've talked a little bit about your creative writing process.
Yeah.
How is yours different, and how are you teaching it to other people?
Yeah. I had this really cool experience this summer. I went and did a workshop with this woman named Pat Schneider. She's 82, and she wrote a book called How the Light Gets In. She's written tons of books, but I think it was 30 years ago she started this thing called the Amherst Writers and Artists Group in Amherst, Massachusetts. And her whole goal was to help people find their original voice. So she would sit with kids in impoverished parts of town. She would sit with women in prison. She would sit with women who have been battered and abused. She would basically say, your voice has been oppressed for so long, and she created this really safe creative writing process for people to find the thing that they've kind of kept inside of them. Yeah. And I think as songwriters, we often struggle to find what our original voice is, or we think we're supposed to write like someone else. And so I've kind of taken what I've learned from this workshop, and I've started to infuse that into songwriting. We have a songwriting community at our church, at Journey Church, and we took a retreat back in August. And I started the whole songwriting weekend with an exercise from that writing workshop. And it was crazy to see how people going back into their story and writing something creative, how it kind of unlocked this, not only this vulnerability, but this willingness to share with other people and collaborate. And I really do believe it kind of set the tone for that whole weekend. And the next day, 20 people in, 5 or 6 different groups wrote 16 songs in 9 hours. And it was one of the most beautiful, fruitful experiences of my life. And so I think we all have an original voice, and people are so stuck in that it has to be grammatically correct, or, as a songwriter, things have to rhyme, or things have to, it has to be verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. And I think there's a really beautiful thing to unfold in breaking that mold. And so I'm beginning that process of inserting that creative writing process into songwriting. And I think there's going to be a really cool marriage down the road.
Man, that's so fascinating to me, because often we come into a session with a target we're trying to hit, or a, this person needs a single, or this person needs, that's so backwards. Yeah. What does that actually look like in practice?
Yeah. We sat with a girl the other day who's, she's been in the process of trying to figure out what her artistry looks like and what she has to offer. And she's a worship leader at a church out of town. And she spent a lot of years here in Nashville, and the comparison game, I think it just kind of started to crush her. And almost every time we sit with her, usually turns into this long conversation, and we'll usually go get coffee. I think maybe in the 4 or 5 times we've written with her, we've written one song. And so for us, the agenda is more the relationship than the song. And I think what happens in that, and I'm not saying that that's a really great business model, because I don't think it is. There's not a lot of money to be made if you're a songwriter, counseling people through all of your songwriting sessions. But I think we've been given a lot of liberty in that, we have All Sons and Daughters as a vehicle to, to give us that freedom in those writing sessions to sit with people and go, here's our story. What's yours? And I think that for me, realizing that last week and just kind of pulling some of those truths out of her, she said this line that it really kind of landed on me. And she said, I just want to know, am I now who I was meant to become? And I was like, I don't know that we would have gotten there had we not spent the last hour talking about how heavy life has been lately. But that was the beginning.
She probably wasn't thinking in terms of, oh, well, here's a genius song lyric.
Right. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Yeah. But it was really beautiful to see that. That was her internal voice coming out. And it was, I think it's one of the strongest lines in the song.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, it's heavy.
Yeah.
It's awesome to be able to pull that kind of stuff out of people, or just collaborate with people that feel that deeply.
Yeah. And I think everybody does. I think that's what I'm learning is that we sell ourselves short a lot. And we hold ourselves to this crazy high standard that every song has to be better than the last song. But really, I think if you can get to that truth within you, the success of a song is immeasurable.
Yeah.
And I think that is the struggle in this industry, is there is an easy way to measure success in this industry, but at what cost?
Yeah.
So.
Well, so I mean that's amazing. You're sort of mentoring people just in your everyday creative writing process. I love it. Mm. Are you doing any specific things for? I feel like maybe that you wouldn't even advertise this about yourself, but I feel like people are drawn to you as a leader in the songwriting community. Are you doing specific things that's like, are you hosting a weekly mentor group for people wanting to become songwriters, or what are you doing?
No, but now I've got new ideas. Thanks, Seth.
I just feel like I've heard that around your name a lot lately. Like, man. Leslie's a leader in the songwriting industry.
Man, thank you. No, I think that's forming. That desire in me is definitely forming. This last year, forming that songwriter group at our church, that was totally like from the Lord. I was walking into my kitchen one day and I heard the word fold. And I was telling my husband this later, and he goes, do you think maybe God was talking about that laundry we've been ignoring in the guest room?
I was
like, I don't know.
My mind just went there.
Yeah, I don't know if that's what he was telling me. But it led me to this passage of the Good Shepherd, and to be in the sheepfold is to be in this place of safety. And we as a church have not been in that place for the last season. And so the other part of that passage is the sheep know the shepherd by his voice. And so what as songwriters is our responsibility to the church? And I think it is to interpret the voice of God and create music that people can, in the moment, go, this is God speaking to me. And so the whole songwriting community was birthed out of this desire to give our church songs that led us through this season of kind of being outside the fold, outside of what we would normally feel as safe or comfortable.
Yeah.
And so then that just birthed this desire in me. And so it's beginning, and we're taking some time off from the road next year, and my desire is to continue looking and leaning into that, because it does happen on a day-to-day basis just in my relationships. And the more I talk about it, the more passionate I get about it. And I really believe that there is a deep desire in a lot of artists and songwriters that want to get in touch with that original voice within them and go, what do I have to offer? And I think yourself is the answer to that question. We all have ourselves to offer, and that's better than any training or skill that you can learn in school or from the school of hard knocks even. Just be yourself.
So beyond music and beyond helping songwriters, you guys also give back a lot. Talk to us a little bit about like Hands and Feet Project and stuff like that, other things that you guys are involved with.
Yeah, so Mark Stewart, who founded the Hands and Feet Project, and Will McGinnis, they have been a huge part of the Journey community, our church. And actually, like, a huge part of why All Sons and Daughters even exists, because David and I both were a part of their project, the No Hope Collective, several years ago. And so we have just fell in love with what Mark and Will do down at the Hands and Feet Project, and we've been begging for them and really trying to find out a way for us to take their child sponsorship model on the road. And this year is the first year it's worked out. And I know there's a few other bands, the Reimagined Audio Adrenaline is currently, I think, out with, they're taking it out. But it's such a cool process for us to invite people into. It's almost like a boutique where, you've got your Targets and your Walmarts, but you also have these like really cool places in downtown Franklin that you can only get this one kind of experience. And for us, Hands and Feet Project and the way they do child sponsorship, it's so personal and small and family oriented that it's a huge privilege for us to tell that story every night. And their family style care. So these kids, a lot of these kids come from like really abusive situations, or they've come out of other orphanages where they have been neglected and not cared for. And Hands and Feet does this turnaround for them, gives them a home and a family and a place of belonging. And I think more so than just saving kids, they're actually going to change Haiti. I really believe that these kids that they are raising up are going to be the next generation of leaders in Haiti. I pray that they are. And so yeah, it's they for us have been a huge organization. We've also partnered with an organization called Feed One, and they feed through their feeding program. They actually sponsor a lot of the kids in Haiti as well at Hands and Feet. So it's always somehow been connected to Hands and Feet. They have a clothing line and an accessory line called Haiti Made. Okay. And a lot of the kids that age out of the orphanage, they're creating jobs for them. And they're making leather goods and, wool hats, and I don't think they wear them in Haiti because it's so flippin' hot down there. They're like, what are these terrible heat devices only hipsters wear? So
exactly.
It's HaitiMade.org. It's a really cool organization that is helping these kids get jobs. So
very cool.
Hands and Feet.
That's awesome.
Well, I know you're busy. Thank you for stopping by. Full Circle Music Show.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Where can
for
people
having
check
me.
out All Sons and Daughters?
AllSonsandDaughters.com. And we're
Easy
on, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that good stuff.
And we just have former Full Circle Music Show guest Mia Fields walk in.
Mia Fields, the one and only.
What do you have to say about Leslie Jordan before she leaves?
She's a straight up legend.
Oh, gosh.
She's all the kinds of legendary. The girl can write songs with anyone, anytime, anyhow, anywhere. She's an amazing worship leader, and she's just in general a nice person. So if you bump into her at a coffee shop, definitely go say hi.
I'm really glad you can't see
Pretty
my
sh-
face right now.
Pretty
'cause it's
shining
red.
endorsement.
Oh my gosh. Mia Fields taught me everything I know. So.
Well, thanks for stopping in.
Yeah, thanks
Thank
for having
you.
me.
Hi, this is Seth Mosley, and you're listening to the Full Circle Music Show, the why of the music biz. Thanks for sticking around with us week after week. Our audience is growing every single week, and a big part of that is those of you who have headed over to iTunes and left us good ratings and reviews. See, when people go to search for their podcast, they look for those 5-star ratings, and we really, really appreciate your help in getting us some great ratings and great placement on iTunes. So head over to iTunes and do that if you haven't already. This show is produced by the Full Circle Music Company with editing help from Jericho Scroggins. Just a quick shout out to Jericho. For those of you guys who listen to this show every single week, this is the man behind the curtain. He's the one producing these shows. So if you check him out on social media, send him a message, let him know how thankful you are for him doing all this hard work every single week to make this show possible. We will see you next week on the show, and thanks for sticking around with us.